We're almost there. We're almost all there, aren't we? So you're not feeling 100% today.
Got man flu. I'm dying.
I'm going to make things easy for you today, and you're gonna be able to sit back and relax. I'm gonna drive things today, give you lots of cool things to talk about, and you don't have to do any of the heavy lifting today, Sam Jax.
That sounds fantastic. Are we still going to talk about Elon selling digital real estate via Twitter?
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about today, because it's just so up our street in terms of what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter at the moment. It just seems a bit mad not to just talk about it, because things are moving so fast in the world of Twitter. Like, we're recording this at the end of November 22. By the time this comes out, things could change. Everything's been so fast moving. And what Elon's been doing at Twitter since he's taken over is doing hardcore optimization, essentially. And I think as people who've been talking about it, since we've begun this series, it's just worth looking at the timeline of events of what's happened since Elon's taken over Twitter and kind of giving it our two penneth on whether that's good or bad in terms of optimization and kind of looking at some of the reactions, because this is so unprecedented. You don't see billionaires taking over publicly traded companies that are so much in the world spotlight like this. So it's definitely like an interesting cultural moment or movement that's going on, right?
Yeah. Can I do the easy bit, which is current state before Elon got his hands on it, what Twitter was? Because I think it's probably helpful also to say what Twitter as a platform is. Basically, it's a pretty simple platform, but it's a website, or was a website. There is an app. There are apps now, but a bit of HTML, a bit of jQuery, a bit of backend, and basically a platform where people can go and share text. And then what makes it different from all the other platforms is that you can follow anybody. It's not like Facebook where you have a friend request, or Instagram where you can request to follow someone and potentially their account can be private. That's what's interesting about it, is it's just open. You just tweet into the void. It's very, very open in the way it's designed. And before Elon got his hands on it, 234-ish million users. So, I mean, the UK is like 70, 80 million people. So it's three times the size of the UK in terms of users. Like, if everyone in the UK had 3 accounts, that's how many people are on it. That's a lot of people. About 7,500 employees, which I think we're definitely going to dig into, like that good, bad, or indifferent.
Not anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's where it was. Essentially, when you break down what Twitter was, at least, it was a brand. It was some software that really, it only had copyright to protect it. There's a clever algorithm for serving up the content, which I imagine they've got a patent on. But basically, it was a movement and a brand where the value of it was all these people have signed up to be on the platform. And that's how a lot of tech startups get their money, is just like, well, users are worth a couple of pounds hypothetically, and that's why they can borrow loads of money and never generate any revenue. And that's what Twitter had been doing for so long, because they get value. You get these massive valuations because they've managed to attract all these people to the platform. They don't necessarily have to be profitable, because hypothetically all that data is worth money. And I think I'll stop there, because we're going to talk about monetization and all that other good stuff. But that's basically what Twitter is.
Have you read Hatching Twitter? Have you read Hatching Twitter at all?
I have not.
By Nick Bilton. It's a really good biography, fact-driven, based on interviews, etc. Like the story of Twitter from like the beginning stages, when it was just, a group of gung-ho software developers, working all hours at God's sends in Silicon Valley, trying to make, something really good. And then it kind of covers the story about how they all ended up, one ended up, Jack Dorsey ended up getting control of Twitter from the others after going and coming back again. And so, it's definitely had like a shaky start in terms of ownership and direction. And I think in the beginning, it was very much thought that Twitter was going to be this product that would take over from Facebook as the kind of the status update, right? And just be quick and easy and allow people to just get a quick hit of what's going on. And it's what drove celebrities and politicians to the platform.
It's very light. It's very light as a user experience, and it's very light in the tech as well. It's not got heavy tech, has it, in to operate as a platform.
And if I recall in the beginning, because I literally signed up to Twitter within the first 6 months. So I've been there like a really long time. Even though my current account is from 2018, the account I had previously that I deleted just because it had so much history that I didn't want when I set up my own business anymore. Like no one needed to see my old tweets about X Factor and, things like that, right? But it was like celebrities like Stephen Fry adopting it and showing us all how to use it that I think really helped in the UK in particular. Like no one knew what a hashtag was, but like a couple of mavens like that were able to kind of teach us all. So once we got the language of how Twitter works, hashtags worked, and then like, what's the retweet, what's the mention, like just those few simple actions can kind of help create a kind of an amazing network effect of getting information out there, getting opinions.
Like a socially accepted dynamic. Kind of like when you attend a party, you say hello to people and you ask how they are, ask how the family were. Like there's like a socially acceptable way to exist in the world, isn't there?
Yeah.
Once that had been established for Twitter, that's when it started to grow.
Yeah. Like I feel like the best analogy I ever heard about Twitter as a social media platform was it's like the equivalent of someone, you being in a room in a party with like millions of other people and you're all just shouting out your own thing, and then occasionally someone else in that room is shouting out a similar thing, and then you can connect with each other and kind of talk, which when you put it like that, it just sounds a bit demented really, but
sounds a bit obnoxious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the users that are on there are very, very engaged. I mean, the people that use it are let's high net worth individuals relative to other platforms. I mean, they're not builders, brickies, stay at home, like normal people. They're a lot of the sort of people that are attracted to Twitter are people that have a vested interest in a public profile, which, by that nature, they're typically they have their own monetization ability. They're not reliant on salaries necessarily. So that's given us a bit of the history. Twitter starts March 2006-ish, has this up and down rocky road of history, which, we can probably talk about another day. And then Elon comes along.
Wow, many, many years later, though, in between that time, what we've seen is Twitter become publicly traded, go through a couple of high-profile CEOs, Jack being one of them, seen some incredibly high-profile people come to the platform, like Trump, and use that platform for, I think, nefarious reasons. I mean, I know like Americans love freedom of speech, but if you have command of 100 million plus audience, like you do have some responsibilities there. And I think what we saw around the 2016 ongoing period on Twitter was just what happens when you give one or two individuals all the attention on that platform without kind of any consequences, And so what's happened over the past couple of years in sort of backlash to, I think what Trump's done mostly is he got removed. He got removed by the kind of the Twitter team in a kind of very precedented way, which, enabled other social platforms to remove him as well. And then there was a bit of calm on the platform, I think, since he got removed. He got removed because specifically it was deemed that he kind of encouraged his supporters to kind of go march on Capitol Hill. Yeah, storm the Capitol, as it were, and possibly create an insurrection, which is, not good for a society to have people rioting like that. And Trump went and set up his own platform called Truth Social, and things kind of went a bit quiet on the Twitter front. But Elon Musk started tweeting a lot more on there and kind of definitely grew a following. And someone jokingly said to him, "Would you buy Twitter?" And that sort of put into action a chain of events, really, that has led to him actually buying the platform and taking it over.
I know we're giving a long preamble to, the events we want to talk about, but I think something I'd just like to highlight is Elon Musk makes these grand statements around, well, it just makes sense. We want to be multiplanetary because being on one planet is obviously a bit of a risky thing for the human species. Like that's a big relative to what we're capable of or were capable of when he started SpaceX. Big statement. All cars should be electric because, better for the planet if we're not burning as much fossil fuel. Like, big statements. And PayPal wants to change banking it was actually Zip Pay, wasn't it? Or Zip2, and then it became Zip Pay. Like, wants to change banking infrastructure. Like, he wants to disrupt these systems. And for another day, the Trump thing is specifically very interesting because Elon Musk's grandfather was a technocrat, believed that essentially technologists, engineers, scientists should run the world, not politicians. And I find it fascinating that he's going, I'm going to let this politician make a fool of himself, or be very divisive at least, because he's 50% of the population think he's great, of the US population, 50% don't-ish. And I think it's fascinating that he is acquiring all this control and power. But yeah, that's just as an aside. I don't think we want to focus on that. I think we want to get into the operations of his business, the operations of Twitter, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it helps to know that, he does come from a family of technocrats, and definitely I think that, informs his direction as an entrepreneur. But yeah, I mean, he tweeted back in March asking people with a poll that got around 2 million votes, free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle? It got people talking, and him continually criticizing, whether people can actually have a voice on Twitter or not was definitely a kind of a catalyst to have more attention on him and, Twitter as well.
2 million votes on Twitter, to put that in perspective, that's more or less 1% of all Twitter users.
It's a big poll, and I think he knew what he was doing back then. I think he tweeted that out March, I think, and then turns out a week later, he ends up with a 9% stake in the company. He's either bought into it or it's been revealed, who knows, and he's invited to join the board of directors. And then another week later, the CEO, Parag Agrawal, announced that Musk had declined to join the board of directors. And then another week later, so this had all happened in the space of 2 to 3 weeks, he makes an offer to purchase Twitter for $43 billion, which is around about $54 a share, and take the company private. So I'm not in any way under the illusion that this was all an accident. Okay, I believe he knew what he was doing. He's a businessman. He trades at a very high level. He understands markets. He understands share price. He understands how takeovers work. So this had all happened within a couple of weeks. And you know what? The cheek of it, he even put a poll out. He said taking Twitter private at $54 should be up to the shareholders, not the board. 3 million votes on that one. So, he's using polls to kind of get feedback real time from people. By April 25th, the board had accepted his offer, basically. And then we have a little bit of drama over the summer because Musk says he doesn't want to pay for it because he believes that a big share of Twitter's daily users are bots. And so that goes into a summer of back and forth with Twitter taking him to court, and then him finally deciding to kind of go ahead with the purchase last month in October 2022. But we got treated to lots of interesting stuff that the kind of court had acquired during that process, like tweets between him and Jack Dorsey, tweets between him and other high-profile CEOs and billionaires as well. Getting a vibe about what people thought of Musk and his decision to acquire Twitter as well. I still don't think we know quite why he decided to acquire Twitter, to be honest with you. I think he sees it as an interesting challenge. He said recently that it's not a software company. He said it's a servers and communication company. And as someone who heads up a space comms company with Starlink, as someone who works in self-drive cars and cars in general, and that are networked up, he's better placed to work on fixing a business like Twitter than perhaps the kind of broken way that Twitter was before. And we know it was broken because he highlighted the bot situation and also how much money Twitter was losing as well.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So let's scale it back. Say you're going to go on microacquire or somewhere like that and buy yourself a little business. Let's say it's a website business, affiliate marketing. They typically sell for 30 to 40 times monthly revenue. So let's say you've got a website that's making £1,000 a month from traffic to it through SEO sales. That's going to sell between 30 and 40 grand. That kind of makes sense. Twitter's valuation, the 44 billion, of which I think he stumped up about 30 odd billion of his own money and then loaned the rest. They ain't turning over anywhere near that kind of revenue. In fact, they were losing like $4 million a day.
So much cash. Yeah, so much cash every single day. And, the model before he took over was revenue from advertisers, right? Predominantly revenue from advertisers. So keeping advertisers sweet, selling to them, having sales teams all around the world to sell to local advertisers, companies, businesses, agencies, massive part of their business model. That costs money to do. You've got to have premises all around the world. You've got to network with agencies. You've got to network with brands. You've got to employ people. And, the costs were just driving up and up and up. I mean, it's no wonder Twitter said when all of the pandemic and the work from home kind of revolution happened, oh, we're letting everyone work from home now, because they probably couldn't afford to heat the offices anymore. Do you know what I mean?
It's bonkers, because when you look at SaaS, the reason SaaS, software as a service, is so appealing is because one, two, less than 10 people typically to knock up a software solution, about 20% of that to support it thereafter. And Twitter hasn't changed that much. And yeah, okay, they've added on all these layers of services, but there's a lot of bloat in there. And I just want to come back to what I said at the beginning, the disassociation from tech startup valuations to actual business valuation. And I think now, as the world is getting more and more tech savvy, people are kind of looking up the skirt of these tech businesses going, hang on a minute. Yeah, okay, you're all really smart, but your business fundamentals aren't that great. Like, and I think that's a lot of what Elon Musk has gone in and done. He understands network effect. And I think it's just something that has always blown my mind. It's one of the network effects. Metcalfe's law. A guy, Richard Metcalfe, invented Ethernet cards, and he essentially had this problem selling Ethernet cards because they were a few $1,000s, and you buy yourself, go back to 60s, 70s, you buy yourself a computer, it doesn't speak to anything. You buy an Ethernet card for a couple of grand. Great. Well, what do you plug it into? Oh, my printer. Well, now you need an Ethernet card for your printer. Okay, well, you just spent $6,000 so that your computer can talk to your printer. Hypothetically, because you probably wouldn't connect them that way. But the point is, you have this linear cost that every time you add a card, you get an extra, call it $3,000. And he's trying to sell these cards to people, and people are going, well, what? I'm not seeing the return here on spending £3,000 and getting things to talk to each other. And he thinks on this and comes up with Metcalfe's law, which is, no, you're thinking about it all wrong. The problem is you haven't bought enough cards yet to see the value. And it's akin to having a mobile phone. One person with a mobile phone, no use. Two people with a mobile phone can now call each other. You add a third person in, well, one person can now call two people. You add a fourth person in, one person can now call three people. So you've got this linear increase in cost, but this exponential increase in the value of the network. And that was a theory he used to sell his Ethernet cards, but then it was proven with Facebook by some Swedish team, I think in 2009. And they proved Metcalfe's law is like every time you add a node to the network, which is a person, a user, you're exponentially increasing the value of this overall network. And when you look at what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink and Tesla, and he's leveraging network effect to the max by connecting all this data. He's not a product person, in my opinion. He's a data network person, and that's where he started with PayPal. He said, right, we want a network of users, and they were, well, he was ZipPay, wasn't he? But then PayPal, he became CEO and drove it. And I just want to bring us back to this valuation, this $44 billion valuation, a loss of 4 million quid a day, roughly. I mean, the figures are so big, it kind of doesn't matter how far out we are. Losing money, spending a load to get it. But you've got this massive network potential there. And in my head, he is an entirely rational person. He's using other people's emotions, doing these polls to like drive influence, but he's a rational guy.
Oh, yeah. And he said he's got Asperger's as well, which...
Did he need to say that?
Yeah. Well, he announced it, didn't he, on Saturday Night Live? But yeah, like I think as a personality trait, I get, well, it's not even, it was a personality trait. It just probably helps give him a thick skin in dealing with criticism, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of engineers, scientist-y type people are on the spectrum somewhere, and it's a hell of a skill when it comes to logical thinking. You have lower social EQ typically, and you usually have higher IQ typically with those. And I speak from experience. A lot of my family are Asperger. That's a totally incorrect frame to use, but that condition. And what you find is things are very black and white. Things are either right or wrong. They're very binary, and the data is everything. But what's really interesting with this guy is the way he's overcome his sort of blind side to EQ, to emotion, to that emotional intelligence that sort of Steve Jobs clearly had, where he brought this art and science together. Elon Musk has gone, no, I'm just going to solve problems that are so big that they tap into the fundamental, like, bit of being of people, like to be on another planet, to save the world with electric cars, to be able to have internet anywhere in the world. Like, I can communicate, like, he's just tackled the problems at such a high level. And then he's a geek and just creating flamethrowers and or like the Cybertruck.
For the Boring Company. Yeah.
Yeah, he just does cool stuff that and just goes and is a child. And I think because of that, people kind of find him a little bit endearing because they're like, okay, this guy's crazy.
Yeah, but to counter that though, just to get back to our timeline, right? So he takes over, fires CEO immediately and the kind of like the top team, and then goes on to do an absolute cull of the workforce. And it's done in a way, I don't think it's him, like some Dr. Evil type person in a mountain doing it. You know, I think this is just the American way, actually. But they send emails out to people and they're like, off you go, see you later. And, you know, culled a massive chunk of the workforce. And I think that disconnect from the human element and, you know, not recognizing the fact that there are people with lives and families behind that, you know, has meant that a lot of people aren't endeared to him. And I think, you know, the way he's just kind of gone in and dug deep and cut deep to get rid of half of all Twitter employees.
Yeah, so what's that, about nearly 4,000 people?
Yeah, and I think it's up to about 75% now since this timeline that I'm reading. And I think there's more culls in the workforce planned as well, you know, and it bloodbath, like total removal of whole teams in different regions. Apparently no one's going into the UK office at all. All of the marketing team got totally removed in India. But the thing is, like when you know, a lot of this was reported on Twitter by tweeps, right, as they sort of call themselves. And one person was hired to do key cards for the San Francisco building. Like that was her job. And she got fired and they had to ask her to come back because everyone had got locked out. But it got me thinking, there was one person hired just to do key cards, you know, and what other bloat had kind of happened at the business. And perhaps they had lost sight of that. And as many tech companies are kind of going through like the same situation at the moment, having to realize that hard growth, the trajectory that they were on has to stop and they have to scale back. And, you know, it's a shame that there's human beings at the end of that. And so that they're not loving Elon as much as perhaps other people are.
Yeah, so right. I'm going to say something and then I'm going to like cover my arse and caveat it down. I'm totally into it. Totally into it. I think he's doing exactly the right thing. However, here's the arse covery bit. There absolutely should be a sensible exit policy where you go, look, this company isn't running correctly. It's not running efficiently. And because if it was anyone other than Elon and it was a scrappy startup, like this is normal. Scrappy startups are like, look, it's really dangerous getting into a startup game because there's huge risk and we don't know when we're going to make cash. And then companies get comfortable and they get all this bloating. But there is a right way to do it, which is you've got to care for people, you've got to exit them correctly, you've got to make sure that you aren't screwing them. Clearly, that's not Elon's strong point. Clearly, he's really good at figuring out the logical steps that need to happen. And I think we probably want to talk about like why this makes a lot of sense. Just purely academically, notwithstanding there's all these people that have got, or at least feel screwed. I mean, whether they have been or haven't been, that isn't overly clear. Like, I think it's completely reasonable for companies make layoffs all the time. And it's a complete paradigm that it's safe to have a job. It's not. You have a contract which has clauses in there to protect the downside risk, but it's on people don't take responsibility for themselves. You see this when governments have large organisations, like in the UK, we've just had it where they've reduced government employees by 5% were they aiming for? Getting rid, and people are like, oh my goodness, like, you've got rid of my job. Well, yeah, that sucks. Like, it does, but no one ever said that this was like a guarantee for life. And we're human. We're motivated by change.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in the midst of issues in your business where you are losing money, not making money, and part of that loss of money is on headcount that isn't generating a return on investment. That is the biggest, hardest part of business optimization I think any business owner needs to go through. My old MD at the agency I was at, said it never gets easier letting people go. He'd done it countless times. It's always like the worst job that you have to do as a business owner. And so, I can't imagine anyone's like really happy, bye everyone, kind of thing like that. But that they are seeing it as a necessity to optimize that business and get it making money, especially because as soon as Elon Musk took over, he started as he meant to go on. He's been very jovial. He's posted memes. Like the day he took over, he posted a meme of himself, a picture of him in a meme where he was holding a sink and walking into the Twitter offices. And that relates to a meme that people always posted in the comments under one of his tweets, which was a sink at a door. Like, let that sink in. It's like a joke. So he lived that meme, got someone to take a picture, put it on, on day one, right? So, I think like that kind of pitch where he's at as a boss, perhaps hasn't kind of sat particularly well with people.
It comes back to intent, doesn't it? Like, if his intent is to save this company and make it everything it's potentially capable of being, I liken it to, a mother and a child on an aircraft, and the oxygen mask comes down. The mother has to put on her oxygen mask first to stand a chance of being able to care for the child. You put the child's oxygen mask on, the mother's passed out and no use to the child, cannot save the child anymore. And that's where he's at right now. It's like, okay, like the child might have to pass out so that I can save it, but this is what has to happen. And he's not doing it to screw people. The opposite. And yeah, he's got a vision, and yeah, he might appear cold and heartless and all those things, but that's a perception of him. I think his intent is quite clearly, as we've seen, he isn't doing things to be self-serving. Like, that's very clear. He is not a happy person.
Yeah, I don't even think he wants to make money, because he's like practically the richest or the second richest at the time of recording this, right? So I think he's definitely doing it to fix something. I mean, just to bookend like the staff layoffs, right? It's interesting because the former CEO, the one before last, Jack Dorsey, came out and said, I realise many are angry with me about the layoffs because I own the responsibility for why everyone's in this situation, because I grew the company size too quickly. So Elon Musk came in to do a job to optimize, but really the issue was kind of back in the timeline for Twitter. They had a lot of cash from their IPO. They had lots of lavish offices in very fancy locations. The London one is in, I think it's Holborn, between Holborn and Covent Garden. San Francisco, Granwick is not cheap. I'm sure New York, Granwick isn't cheap as well. Lots of jobs to call advertisers. And after Elon Musk had taken over, advertisers were not loving the memification of Twitter. They've not also loved his hard stance on free speech, and that means bigging up the Republican and the Democratic sides of the political spectrum in America, because Twitter's been very left-leaning, and also talking about the big one of letting Donald Trump back. And he put a poll out. He put a poll out about that, of course. And the poll, let's have a look and see how many people did that poll, because it is...
The problem here is that tech is outpacing the political system, and yeah, what the hell do you do about that?
So he put a poll out on November the 19th saying, reinstate former President Trump, yes, no. There was 15 million votes on that, 15 million votes. And apparently they got rid of a lot of bot votes as well. And my understanding, looking at some of the tweets from the engineers and him as well, was they were using this as a bit of a honey trap to get bots to come to them so they could do lots of exclusions as well, which I think is very clever. But in the end, 51.8% of people voted yes. So he let him and a whole bunch of other people back on the platform. And I think all banned people will be given amnesty and allowed back on the platform next week as well. Now, this has put advertisers off because advertisers are in a position where they're like, I don't want my tweets next to right-wing information, or I don't want my tweets next to someone who has anti-women, anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish sentiments, etc. And rightly so, but he's had to make that decision of, do we create Twitter as a platform for advertisers and curtail to advertisers, or do we go down the other road? And that's another big part of the optimization process that he's going through. So looking at bloat in terms of employees, hard job, tough one. He's been left with a core amount of tweets left to kind of work on the platform. And to your point earlier, do that many people need to work on the core element at Twitter? Because it's built already. It's more like maintaining servers and maintaining speed and load times, right?
Yeah, and putting in the capability, any of these new capabilities that you want. So if you want to clean up spam, well, okay, you've got to come up with a way of doing that. If you want to fight AI, okay, well, you've got to come up with a way of doing that. But they're crack teams of less than 10. And you would assume after this amount of time, there isn't that much technical debt inside of Twitter. Like, it was well built by engineers. So.
Apparently there is, but then it depends what the technical debt is. Do you want to explain what technical debt is quickly for anyone listening? Because it's a techie phrase.
Yeah, so basically, you come up with an idea to throw together a product or service. So you start coding, and it's like writing the first draft of a book. And you write the first, say, 2 or 3 paragraphs, and they kind of make sense, and they kind of get you to, paragraph 4. But then rather than go back and rewrite paragraph 1 to make, to correct any errors or changes you want to make, you write another paragraph that kind of corrects paragraph 1 retrospectively. And this is a very broad brush, not desperately accurate way of saying you end up...
We like broad brush.
Yeah, you end up with all these errors that are sort of commented out and corrected, and little comments and spelling mistakes, and they're all in there. And the end result is you have a book that people buy and is making money. That's the equivalent of your software product, but there's a load of in there that doesn't work desperately well. It isn't nice and clean and optimized. So what good software engineering practice is that you will allow time to go back and optimize your code to sort all these collections out. And it gets quite difficult because you can have people who are speaking in different languages, writing the code. And I'm trying to think, what's the famous, might be Uber has got a load of Spanish in there because they used a Brazilian development team and no one knows what the code's doing. There's quite a lot of these cases, and this is how code breaks and you end up with bugs and all this other stuff. And it's quite an expensive thing to do, go back and fix technical debt, because typically it's not the person that wrote it that has to go back and look through it. And this is where all these good design principles come back in. But what I will say on the engineering side is Elon Musk is awesome at this. When he was building both Tesla and SpaceX, typically in a manufacturing setting, you'll have designers in an office and you'll have manufacturing teams in an assembly hall, doing production. And he said, no, well, that's clearly stupid, because what happens is the people building the things make tweaks and changes because the design isn't quite right. And it takes time if it is ever reflected back to the design and support teams. He said, no, co-locate, you go work on the shop floor, you go work in the same space. He knows how to solve these engineering problems.
If I was going to layman's it even more, it's like the equivalent of looking at a really lovely house on a road that's just been built. But if you actually looked at the foundations, there's just things propping up things, and it all works and it's solid, but you probably wouldn't have built it like that in the beginning if you could start again from scratch. And I think that's what he's doing. He's looking at Twitter and thinking, how can they optimize the servers, the load time? That's the things he's been talking about. But the business model of relying on advertisers is another part of the optimization as well, clearly, because as soon as he took over, he was like, yeah, we're going to charge people to access Twitter and be verified, essentially.
Brilliant.
Yeah, great. And it was definitely divisive. And I think true Twitter lovers were really interested in having the so-called blue check, because that's what celebs have. Turns out, get this, right? If you knew a guy at Twitter, you could pay for one of those blue checks. right? In the same way, and this report had come out last week, the week before, Facebook, Meta, had got rid of a bunch of contractors who apparently, because they had access to Facebook's internal operation system, it's called OOPS. They were to let people into accounts and things like that. Some of them had turned that into a racket where if you had been banned from your advertising account or Facebook account by the kind of automated system, you could pay one of these people thousands of dollars to get your account back, basically. So, there are insiders at these big software companies hidden from view because the headcount is so big who are making money and are not adding to the much needed trust and reputation perhaps they haven't had, and he keeps banging on and on about this, free speech. When he let Trump back, he talked about the people have spoken. The people have spoken. Like, he's so keen on everyone having a voice and being able to fix the things that people say in an automated, community-driven way, rather than having a small group of politically leaning people do that on their own at Twitter. Because otherwise it becomes no better than a politically leaning newspaper who puts, from a hegemonic point of view, puts out, their take on the world. And that's what, Twitter had become in many ways.
There's a couple of threads I want to pull on from what you just said. One, let's just talk about the blue tick, the buying the blue tick. So they were hemorrhaging, 4 million quid a day. Don't know how much they're making from advertising, but blue ticking, we're talking about 1 million or so people paying $8 for blue tick. So that's an $8 million increase on the bottom line. He said, I found somewhere that he said he was going to, by 2028, aim for a $23 billion annual turnover, which would make the company worth, Jesus Christ, who knows, 10 times that when you look at the valuations. Incredible. And yeah, okay, maybe lost a few people off platform, but for the most part, that blue tick's valuable because, as we've discussed before, you're doing this kind of stuff for visibility, to get traffic, to get attention, and having a blue tick enhances your trust and likability and all those things that go towards having more valuable attention, in converting that attention essentially into revenue in some way. And $8, neither here nor there. And I just think how smart. He's just like more than halved his cost base in terms of labor. He's immediately gone, boom, out of thin air, there's $120 million a year, like straight away, which he needs to service the $12.5 billion loan he took out to help with the financing. But you just think, well, this guy's not messing around. Like, okay, maybe he doesn't care about people, maybe he does, maybe he's treating people badly, maybe he doesn't. But from a pure financial analytical point of view, you're going, yeah, this guy is turning this business around quick, sharp, and look how much he's done inside of a month. To the finances, like, we'll see whether his strategy's right. And then the other thing I wanted to pull on was you were saying about these people being able to access inside these apps. This is something that personally really interests me because inside of all these social media platforms is a database, and Facebook has gone and built their own technology, query language, GraphQL, and they're built on Neo4j, and I don't fully understand it, but they built these database technologies which enable them to have all this clever querying techniques, which is why the advertising, the targeting, the algorithm's so good. And so there's this database which has got all the users in and all the user IDs, and they may be anonymized to a certain level so that people can work on this data without seeing all the information. But somehow you've got to have a control mechanism so that these engineers can get into the software, into the code, and look at this information and keep it secure and private. That's a genuine technical problem. Someone somewhere has got the master keys. Even if you have, multiple factor authentication for people to go and work on this code, someone somewhere, and in a multi-thousand person company, probably a few people, own the keys for this data. And this data is like the thing that makes the platform so valuable. They sell this data. They sell queries on this data. They sell reports on this data. And I just highlight that because this is a network problem, and I really wonder about, he's been quietly-ish, they've been giving the Ukrainians Starlink so that they can maintain internet connection. The Ukrainians have been are causing absolute havoc with their drone technologies. And the reason they've had hacks from Russia, like, have been successful, but they've fixed them again. And the reason this is interesting is this is the same technical problem you've got with social media platforms, is that how do you allow this data to exist and be pure, if you like? You've got someone like Trump on there. How do you stop that data being manipulated by other actors, other nodes on the network, other bot users maybe that might be nefarious, or accounts, GANs that have been created? He's solving this technical problem already with Starlink, and I think there's a connection there that we maybe won't see it for 5 or 10 years, but at this end, you look at this system, you've got Starlink, okay, is this data connection, but he doesn't really control the data that's on there. With Twitter, he's suddenly got an interface to this data. And then with Neuralink, he's got an interface to the communication platform. I think there's got to be a master plan here. But the thing that is also said that I don't have the depth of technical knowledge to unpick, and I haven't yet fully understood, is that he's come out and said, don't want to talk to anyone else about how Twitter could be on the blockchain. I don't want to discuss how it can be decentralized, because it can't. Now, I've read this a few different times. Other people have quoted him saying it, which kind of goes against this idea that he wants it to be a truth network, because that means that it's centralized in the way I just described, and you have these technical problems. So, I mean, these are more questions than answers, and it's not about optimization. I guess what I'm saying is he's got a chessboard, and he's made some big moves with these big bits of technology. We've previously said that optimization is really, it comes down to the decisions you make, ultimately, your fundamental decision making. And his fundamental decision making here is make it profitable, generate more revenue, reduce my costs. Like, that's what he's done. And he's done it at whatever the cost. Like, it might not look pretty. And we've seen him do this before. We start with SpaceX. Like, SpaceX had 3 rockets blow up, and then he managed to scramble and get all the spare parts together and did a 4th. Like, that was a car crash, or a rocket crash, as the case may be. We saw it with Tesla. Like, the batteries were overheating. They delayed on the Roadster. They then went back to all the people that ordered the Roadster, and it was delayed, and said, actually, we've got to charge you more money. We then saw Tesla, like, very nearly crash into the ground multiple times. We only didn't say it with PayPal because he learned that mistake very early on, that, well, I need to be in control. He wasn't in control of PayPal, but it gave him the capital to get started. Like, the guy's got a history of doing this, of, creating chaos because he can see a bigger picture. And it's only retrospectively that you get to go, oh, Jesus Christ, that was smart.
Either it's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your viewpoint, right? Is that in this ongoing, crash bang optimization that he's doing, so introducing the blue check being one of them, right? Letting, culling a big section of the workforce being another one. Across Twitter and in his other companies as well, is that he's done this in public. He's very much done this with, like, the world's eye on him. And I think the blue check is a really great example of a product that was shipped way too quickly. Like, we heard stories of people sleeping on the floors at Twitter to kind of get it out. And within, like, the first few days of it being shipped, people were buying the blue tick because it was like $8 or whatever, and then pretending to be other people. So in live real time, they were kind of putting out decrees and changes to the rules. Like, if you're a parody account, you have to say parody. And Kathy Griffin got her account banned because she said she was Elon Musk. But all fun and games, right? All fun and games. But then someone had put out that they were Eli Lilly, the massive pharmaceutical company, with a blue check, and had tweeted something along the lines of, hey, all our insulin is free now, or something like that, right? Oh, they said, we are excited to announce insulin is free now. And the message apparently got retweeted more than a couple of thousand times, got like over 10,000 likes. And it looked at first glance like a real message from Lilly. And they had to issue, I've worked with pharma companies a very long time. They never issue apologies. And they had to issue an apology and say this was a fake Lilly account. However, right, it looked like on that day, Lilly shares crashed 6% and wiped like billions of dollars from its market cap, right? And again, as an independent company, as an advertiser, as someone's thinking, am I going to invest like this love in Elon's vision when his crash bang approach to optimization can have massive effects on the market like this? Remains to be seen, really. The rest of us, we build quietly. We might talk about it on Twitter, but we don't have like 100+ million people following us, right? And other software companies, when they launch new features, they roll them out without fanfare and see if they do A/B testing and see if users pick them up or not, and put out the occasional press release and get some influencers to have a look and take their time. But he wants to move so incredibly fast. He will take the risk on being ostracized by advertisers, having his reputation dented, much in the same way his reputation was dented when he hit was it an axe on the window of his like armor car and it smashed and it wasn't meant to smash. In the same way his reputation might have been dented when rockets flew off and things like that. But he will take that on in order to progress quickly.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things here. I'm not sure if it's that he wants to move fast or he just has a different perspective. So with regards to the safety of it, like in engineering, there are safety integrity levels, which you have different levels depending on the risk, the potential risk of failure, the risk of it going wrong. And you work all this out by working out mean time failure rates. So like how long until a wing falls off an aircraft. And then you work within a safety parameter. And when you design the software, you've got to prove that it meets all these qualification criteria. And in financial markets, there's all these rules and regulations. It's all centralized. And in engineering, we have all these standards so that, like, when a dishwasher arrives at the door, like it's going to fit through the doorway because it's designed, like doorways have to be a certain size, dishwashers are a certain size. We have all this standardization in place. With this kind of thing, it's only a social expectation that this is how it should be done. And companies only roll out those things iteratively to protect their own downside risk, as you rightly say, but it's a financial incentive. He's not stood on the train platform as a train's going past at 100 miles an hour going, oh my God, this is shaky. He stood 5 miles out going, okay, well in 20 years, this is where I want to be. And so the fastest way from A to B is in a straight line. And yeah, okay, we're going to have to mow down some houses and, it'd be a bit messy day to day, but he has that size view. And also we've seen he's got the financial resource and the financial backing to take on that risk. So if we're talking about true optimization, and we're optimizing for the outcome, which even if we just said a financial outcome, because we don't actually know what Elon wants here. We think he probably wants a cuddle and to be loved by his dad. That's probably the problem. But let's say this is a financial thing. He's optimized to hell, and yeah, okay, you might crash someone's share price. Well, there's no law or regulation against that. Yeah, he might have some big social influence. Well, that's free speech. That's the nature of it. And I think that I'm not politically well versed enough, and I wish I was much more culturally attuned to appreciate the difference between communism and capitalism. I think in the world that we promote and live in, you've got to let people do crazy, even if the results are really poor. To put too much regulation, too much constraint around this is a dangerous rhetoric, in my opinion. And I wish I could speak to the politics of it, but I can't.
Well, I think that just takes us to the kind of maybe a nice ending for this, because we could talk about what's to become, right, of Twitter, and what's the end game really in terms of what's going on at the moment. Because everything we've talked about today could just go wildly out of date really soon. There's a few different scenarios, right? And one of them is that letting everybody back on the platform without consequence will encourage hate speech. And, terrorist groups, hate speech groups can have a platform to voice, how they feel about certain individuals and things in the world and not have consequence, right? Unless it breaks the law.
And that's not okay. That can't happen.
That 100% isn't okay, because marginalized people won't feel that they can go to Twitter and have a voice and have a community. And that will be really sad, because then it becomes an echo chamber. Only the angry people will be on there talking to the angry people. And in a way, can the angry people learn from the people that they're demonizing? Of course they can. The world can become a better place, if people can see each other's viewpoints. But if you've got, obviously I follow a lot of feminists on there who are on Twitter because I'm a middle-aged feminist woman myself, who talk about having rape threats, because they've talked about football in a certain way or something like that, right? Stuff like that isn't cool. So, there is a lot of work to do to make sure we don't go back to the state that Twitter was around about the height of Trumpism, I think. And, I know there's some features that Musk is aiming to put out, like community notes, which is like a Wikipedia add-on to every tweet that they're testing in the US at the moment. And I love that, because then that gives everyone a chance to have an argument in the comments, a little bit like being on Reddit or something like that, and to fact check things, right? But also to try and stop anonymous trolling, bot accounts, spamming people, trying to verify people. Maybe the blue check might solve that. Maybe it might not, but it remains to be seen. But that's my worry, that association that people have with Twitter being a cesspit will continue, and it will only show the worst side of humanity, not the best.
Yeah. Looking at it from a pure tech perspective, I completely agree with you. There's a few things that come to mind. There are mechanisms for verifying people's ID that banking use. It's about £2.50. It's probably about $3 to do the KYC, know your customer. Like, that's where you verify someone's identity. And, in the instance that you talk about where some, poor woman has got a rape threat for, saying something fairly innocuous, in that instance, we don't have the centralized systems that we all know, love and trust in policing that can deal with this. But again, it's a difficult problem that hasn't got an easy answer, in my opinion. If you give a centralized system the ability to police something like Twitter, that's a dangerous road to go down, because who makes those rules, who makes those laws? And they're, we're all non-consenting members of society. We didn't vote in a lot of the laws we live by because they predate when we were even born. And then you go, well, where else, who is solving this problem? And you go look at China and the social credit system that they're developing, and you go, okay, well, they've got some real clever software there that is monitoring the people and how they live and whether they're conforming to the laws that are deemed to be right or wrong, and you could re-baseline those laws to align with our societal thing, but you then put all that power, all that control in one central place. And I think where you have problems, where you have opposing views, I wonder how much of it is a feature of our society that is a good thing. Like, at the extremes, it's terrible, and terrible consequences that are not acceptable in any way. Is that what I wonder? Is that the cost? Is there an answer there? Because it's good in the middle to have opposing views. When it gets out of hand, clearly not okay. The technical brain inside of me is going, how the hell do you solve that problem? It's a genuinely difficult problem.
Yeah, you're trying to optimize society, right? This has gone beyond optimizing a business. How do you optimize human behavior? How do you optimize society? And I am for one here for it. I will be on Twitter with my popcorn, watching how people behave. And, I've seen things pop up that make me feel better about Elon Musk being in charge. He's really keen on getting rid of anything to do with child pornography, child exploitation on the platform. And, and every time you can DM him and retweet about injustices, and these things are popping up. They're getting in front of him. They're getting attention. So, the hope is that he will be able to make the severe part of what's wrong with Twitter right, the against the law side of what's wrong with Twitter correct, and then we'll see what happens in the messy middle.
But should he be doing that? It's a really interesting thing. Hang on a minute.
Look, 100%. If something is against the law, a platform like Twitter, where it's owned by an individual who can ultimately make all the decisions, right? This isn't shareholder owned anymore. He does put polls out to people and ask them what they think, for sure. But there is no way, as a business owner, you'd be thinking, free speech includes breaking the law. Absolutely not. And so there's a fine line, right? No, child abuse imagery is 100% against the law, and a business should do everything in their power and more to make sure that they do not promote that in any way, shape or form. Porn's Porn's okay. It's not against the law. People are happy with it. There's consenting adults who are really okay with it. So, you have to understand the kind of the line that sort of fits in the middle. By the way, super clear to 100%. I think 99.999% of people where that line is, right? Just to be really clear. But, I can't see him being okay with snuff films being on Twitter. There is a very clear sense of right and wrong, I think, from a moral point of view.
But then he's got this other technical problem, like you've got different laws around the world. So which laws are, they're like, that's a technically difficult thing to implement.
That's to come. Yeah, that's to come, I think, because at the moment, I think trying to solve the left and right issue in America and trying to stop it being so polarized, I think that's a big problem. If they can solve that there, then and only then should they be going out and interfering with what's going on in other countries, I think, as well, and understanding, are women being repressed? Are different minority groups being repressed? And kind of how to solve that. Yeah, I mean, that remains to be seen. That's all to come, isn't it? The other thing that could happen with Twitter is it could just break 100%. We've heard all of these stories about that there not being enough of the right people in charge anymore, the technical debt that you spoke of. There might be just someone peddling in the back storeroom to keep Twitter going for all we know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. If that happens, he'll fix it. Like, the reason that I got turned on to this guy was around SpaceX, and they were updating safety critical software. So this is like stuff that stops the most important software on their space rockets half an hour before takeoff. That's a really difficult thing to do. He can solve really difficult technical problems. Yeah, he might take this fast road that we spoke about where he crack a few eggs. From an engineering point of view, I've got belief that he can solve those problems. I think the problem that we've not seen him solve yet is this social political problem meets engineering. Like, that's a new one for him.
Yeah.
Do we want to summarize the episode?
Yeah, well, it could be. I was going to say, the final thing is it just could go bankrupt. He could just run out of money. And he spoke about that as well. And so it could be that, it's just best for him and for everyone else to just put it back to the big business in the sky. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, he could float it again, couldn't he? And make a load of money. So if you enjoyed this episode, because we definitely did, please like, subscribe, comment below, let us know what you think if you're on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, please rate the podcast however you feel it should be rated. And please head over to YouTube and check us out over there. Let us know what you think.
We're both on Twitter as well. So I'm Hey Vicky Jakes, Vicky with an I.
With a blue tick.
I do have a blue tick. Do you have a blue tick, Sam Jax?
I don't. Only because I just haven't got around to it. I will do as soon as I get around to it.
I wanted to see how it all works, essentially. So... And now I know. You basically, the best part about a blue tick is you get to delay posting your tweets by about half a minute. So if you mess up, you can undo it and do it again.
Oh, we should have a chat about that.
I really enjoyed talking about this today. It's going to go wildly out of date really quickly. So I'm sure we'll come back and see how Musk is doing with his optimization of Twitter, over the kind of coming episodes.
What's our intro for this then? How Musk has made £10 million in a day since starting Twitter?
I don't know. Maybe it's more like how Musk is crash bang optimizing Twitter in front of several 100 million users.
Yeah. Musk making omelettes. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. How Musk is cracking eggs and making enemies. Don't know. That sounds more like it at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I like that. We're cracking eggs and making enemies. What's that? Taking names and making enemies? Into that. Cool.